21 minutes after the hour, America, Hugh Hewitt, bringing you all the breaking news of the day as I toggle back and forth between the death of Joe Cocker and the death of the internet. North Korea collapsed earlier this afternoon. The events in New York City, de Blasio's press conference, the denunciations of Sharpton. I do not want to miss a political story. And my next guest, Robert Costa of the Washington Post, is the ideal person to discuss this with. You ought to be reading Robert in the Washington Post every day and following him on Twitter at Costa Reports. Merry Christmas, Robert. I hope all is well with you.
Hey, it's great to join you, Hugh. Thank you.
The political story I want to jam in here amid the developments in New York is actually the Jeb Bush announcement last week that he's exploring. In other words, as Krauthammer said in the first hour, the expedition's underway, the presidency, and the impact on Chris Christie, if any. What are you hearing, Robert Costa?
Well, I think a lot of the elite Republican donors are certainly very interested in the Jeb Bush boomlet. They see his candidacy as one that could perhaps unite the Republican Party and especially represent their wing of the party. And I think this, in a sense, the timing, the nature of Jeb Bush's announcement of an exploration, it really boxes in Romney and Christie, who have been a little slow getting to the starting line.
Now, I think the line out of Romney world is he's keeping all of his options open and, he hasn't made up his mind what he's going to do. But Chris Christie, everyone is assuming he's going to get in, right? Doesn't he have to move quickly?
I think Christie has to move much more quickly than Romney. Christie is in a different position than Mitt Romney. As you say, Mitt Romney's people think he can wait. He can wait and see how Jeb Bush does, see if it actually plays out, if it unfolds in a successful fashion. If it doesn't, Romney would be perfectly poised to be drafted and to get into the race as a favorite of both some conservatives and some in the party's establishment. Christie, though, he has a lot of troubles internally in New Jersey with the economy there. He has a national fundraising network, but it's not one that's wholly in his hands. And so that's why Jeb Bush is much more of a direct competitor for Christie than he is for Romney.
And so 2 questions about Christie. What's it do to his calendar? Because I didn't think we'd really be into this until February or March, and Jeb Bush stole a march on everyone, and except Romney, who doesn't really have a timetable except the last filing deadline of the first primary. What is the impact on Christie, and when do you expect him to either say go, no go for the benefit of the donor world?
Very, very soon. I've spoken with Christie's aides, and they say he's going to sit down with his family over Christmas this week when his kids are back from college and have a serious conversation. And he has to get moving. Now, Christie, let us not forget that he had a very successful year in terms of connecting with donors. He raised a ton of money for the Republican Governors Association, and he really had some successful wins there. If you look at Maryland as an example of Christie's strategy of playing in a blue state, trying to expand the map. But he has to get moving. He doesn't have a national political organization, even though he has national political strength. He doesn't have a wide circle of advisors working the early states for him. But I do see some movement for Christie in New Hampshire, Hugh. If you look at Matt Mowers, the executive director of the state party in the Granite State, he's a Christie ally, a former Christie aide. So you see Christie has his people all around, but they're not really organized yet.
Now, Robert Costa, there is a money primary. There's also a talent primary. Phil Cox, very able former executive director of the Republican Governors Association, has headed off to Jersey to run Team Christie, or virtually to New Jersey. I don't know if he's left D.C. or not. Who is the Phil Cox for Jeb Bush?
Oh, he doesn't have Phil Cox, but he has one of the preeminent strategists of the Republican Party in the last 30 years. He's got Mike Murphy. Mike Murphy's been out of the game for a little while in terms of running presidential campaigns, but he was very close to Mitt Romney in 2008 and 2012 as a confidant, even though he wasn't officially involved in the campaign. And he famously ran John McCain's 2000 campaign that almost toppled George Bush that won New Hampshire. He's a little bit outside of the box in his thinking. He's very web-focused, very digital. He's certainly a maverick personality, doesn't always go exactly by the party line. But that's who's running Jeb Bush's political shop right now, Mike Murphy.
So what is Murphy going to do then about the Common Core iceberg that any Titanic-sized Bush campaign is going to have to navigate around, or it's going to sink it?
I don't think the phrase navigate around is in the lexicon of Jeb Bush or Mike Murphy. If you look at Murphy's career, and if you look at even Governor Bush's career, they are pretty blunt in standing by their positions and not bowing down to party pressure. I don't think you're going to see a Mitt Romney-type campaign from Jeb Bush where he tries to really move hard to the right in a primary. I think you're going to see a defiant primary campaign, as Jeb Bush has said, run to win the general in a primary and hope for the best.
So what about I have identified Common Core as the greatest vulnerability in a Jeb Bush campaign, far beyond immigration. I actually don't think immigration is a problem for him. I don't think that act of love rhetoric is bad. I don't think any of that matters if he says the right things and people know him, and it's powerful in the general. But Common Core, Robert Costa, as you know, because you go to the same things I go to, is a kudzu-like movement. It's growing almost exponentially in its opposition to what is a continuing metastasizing fiasco.
That's true. But I've spoken directly to Bush's advisors about this and his allies, about how they're going to handle Common Core. And I get a pretty coherent answer. And they say, look back to National Review issues from Jeb Bush's time as governor. Look back to conservative journals and conservative news sites at the time. They praised Bush. He was a favorite of homeschoolers. He was a favorite of education reformers for what he did in Florida. They want to remind people who are skeptics about Bush's position on Common Core that he is with them in spirit, and he is going to water down, I think, his rhetoric just a tad. He's not going to embrace Common Core. He's not going to run away from it, but he's not going to tout it. And he's also going to remind people that a lot of his competitors, a lot of his rivals, were with him on trying to have some standards. You
know, it's interesting, Robert, that sounds almost exactly like Romney vis-a-vis Romney Care. And it worked, all right, it worked. But Common Core, he reminded everyone that the individual mandate was born in the Heritage Foundation and it was only for a state. He made that argument, and it worked in the primaries in 2012. Common Core, boy, it's just so different. Now, here's the second question. What does Chris Christie say, if anything, about the murder of two policemen across the river, about the race issue that has exploded in America, and now it's got Bill de Blasio a couple of hours ago saying it's the media's fault? What's Chris Christie the most voluble? The Washington Post yesterday called him volcanic. What's he do now?
He has to erupt at some point. And it's interesting because Christie, when you talk to his people, they remind you that he's a former prosecutor. He's a U.S. attorney. He knows law and order. He knows racial tensions. He's dealt with these kind of things before as governor and as a prosecutor. But he seems very quiet, maybe too quiet, according to some of his critics. And I think you're going to have to see Christie. He's still grappling with what kind of truth teller does he want to be? Does he only want to be it on fiscal issues? Can he be one when it comes to societal issues and other broader issues?
This is a high risk but a high return proposition in terms of speaking truth into this chaos right now, isn't it, Robert Costa?
I think most politicians and their aides, they think this whole situation is so fluid about the tensions between police and communities, whether it's in Missouri or New York City, that no one really wants to wade into it. And there's a reluctance, I think, especially among 2016 Republicans, to have some kind of firm stand because they don't want to get pegged into a position that could end up tomorrow erupting and becoming something that's even worse.
And the same dilemma for Hillary Clinton, I assume.
Exactly.
Robert Costa, Merry Christmas. Follow him at Costa Reports on Twitter. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Lots more ahead. Stay tuned.